anything that interests you, maybe we can have a research group together, just ideally. just talking. Okay, before we start, I'm Irena Maurin from Educational Technology Department. May I know did you, where do you study? Ini jurusan apa? Oh, educational management. Ya, educational technology kok TP? Educational technology. Hah? Educational management. Wow, MP. Educational management. Oh, thank you ya. Tadi saya ketemu Bu Kania. I met the head of the department just before the event, and I just told her like, okay, we have this. Maybe your students, and she sends money. Yeah, thank you so much then. And she's also the lecturer, new one. So this is the old one, and this is the young one of educational technology 2025 ya. 2025, yeah. I first teach in 2000 here, before I teach in other university. So, yeah. Okay, Dr. Ying has already prepared her, loh, mana tadi? The slides? May we have the slides for about 20, 30 minutes? Yeah, about Sri Lanka. Kalian baca Sri Lanka nggak? Nggak. Yeah, that's why for me, I never been to Sri Lanka also. Dr. Ying also haven't. Ibu Ying juga belum pernah ke Sri Lanka. So maybe it will be interesting to hear her story about Sri Lanka and Australia. Okay, we have, so the floor is yours.
So, selamat siang. Thank you. Thank you so much for actually taking time in your afternoon to come here. We'll make this really casual. Maybe before I start, I'd just like to briefly introduce myself so that we can sort of appreciate why this project came about. So if you hear my accent, I don't speak like an Australian, right? Where do you think I'm from? China? No, not quite. Korea, no. It's a country very near to you, Indonesia actually. Singapore, yes, right. So for me, it was very interesting because I was teaching in Singapore in a primary school for about 10 years. And then as I start teaching, I started to think about what does it mean to be, sort of a global citizen, right? Yeah. So even, exchanges like this as we engage. What is engagement, right? We all stay in the Indo-Pacific region, but coming together, what do you expect of me? What do I expect of you? How do we get along? Okay? So maybe I'll just start off with the first question. What does it mean to educate for coexistence? Coexistence. Let's exist together. Let's live together. Maybe if you want to have a quick search, what is coexistence? What do you understand by coexistence? If I were to coexist with you, ideas? Well, there's no right or wrong answer, actually. So that's actually an interesting study. So if we were to live together, you're different from me, I'm different from you. So how do we actually teach our students to coexist? So just initial ideas. What does coexistence mean? What's important for you? Sorry? New insights.
Because we have a different preference about anything, and we have to share about the new insight with the others.
Yeah, okay. So for some education system, it'll be, sorry, can I get your name? Bita. Yeah, like what Bita said, it is to gain new knowledge, is to engage, is to learn, right? Any other ideas about to live together? What will be important for you? if I was to stay in Indonesia and to be with all of you, what do you expect Ying to behave? How do you want me to behave? Huh? Follow the majority culture. Follow the majority culture. Yeah? Yeah? Maybe that's an expectation, right? Okay. Anyone else? Maybe one more idea. So I need to learn from, I need to engage with you. I need to learn. I sort of need to follow the mainstream culture. There is an expectation to follow the mainstream, ways of doing things. Maybe give me one more idea. Imagine Ying saying, I want to stay with you in Indonesia. So give me some advice on how I can exist, live with the Indonesian people. Any more? One more? Help me out. Well, some people say it is a difficult question actually, because like what I'm going to share, you will see that in different countries, in different parts of the world, and for different people, it means different things to live together, okay? So just keep the question at the back of your mind. We'll come back to this question later. All right, can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so very interesting. We look at this question here, diversity. We're all very different. You may be, I may look like I'm the minority here, not an Indonesian citizen, but among all of you, you have your different, preferences. There are certain ways that, you will accept certain ways of behaving, right? So we are all really, really diverse. But when we come into the world together, this is the question that I'm asking. What does it mean to educate for coexistence? And I really think that it is a very, very important question to ask now. I'm not sure whether you read the news. In December last year, 2025, did you, there was quite an unfortunate incident that happened in Australia, Sydney especially. So, well, you can read up later, but I think these questions become more and more important. In a world of where people are different, how do we live together? So we frame the issue. David Evans, he was there just now. Now when I work with him, he often say, diversity is already there. It's just that now people recognize diversity more. But I think Ibu Arena and I were talking. I think with globalization, with people moving across countries, across different states, there is more interaction now. So I actually argue that there is greater recognition of diversity. However, if you look and read across different countries what's happening, is that sometimes diversity means that inclusion becomes difficult. So I'll just pause here. Inclusion is something that we always want to aim for, but in literature and in many education systems, sometimes they like to frame it as when the place become more diverse, inclusion becomes difficult. Well, that's what they say. I'm not agreeing or disagreeing, but I'm telling you like, this is really diverse. This is really different. This student is different. Our country is really different, and that's what makes it difficult to be united. Okay, so let's think about that, all right? So citizenship education, we have it in every country. Indonesia, you'll tell me more later, okay? Sri Lanka, Singapore, Australia, we all have citizenship education, and it seems that citizenship education has been given the responsibility to fix this problem. Oh, we are more diverse. So let's use education to increase a sense of unity, a sense of inclusion. So what does it look like? All right. Okay, I'm not sure whether you can see the last part there, but it asked the question, so if we want to be united, what values, what philosophy, what binds us together to have some common understanding, right? So that's why I asked the first few questions. What do you expect me to do? So now I'll know, okay, maybe follow the mainstream a bit more. I don't want to come in and sort of say, oh, I want to do things my way, okay? So whose values? Who decides whose value or what values? Okay, I'll go a bit faster. Next slide, please. So my co-author and I, Lasni, she's from Sri Lanka, but she's currently in Japan. She just completed her PhD. So we asked, two of us got together and we asked, how do citizenship education curriculum cultivate young people's capacity to live together with others who are different from themselves? So wherever you are from, which discipline you are from, you will encounter people who are different from you. The person next to you will be different from you, okay? Next slide. So Sri Lanka and Australia, we use it as a case study. I'll go a little bit faster now. So the similarity is that both countries are in the Asia-Pacific region. We are multicultural society, very much like Indonesia. We have got colonial legacies, right? We were colonized before. And we have democratic aspirations. So both talks about democracy, aspire to be a democratic nation. However, we are also different because in Sri Lanka, they're trying to work with post-conflict and they're trying to reconcile. There was a lot of ethnic clashes. Whereas in Australia, we've got migration-driven diversity. Nation building, Sri Lanka is trying to build the nation after a period of conflict. In Australia, they're trying to make sure that everybody get equal rights to participate. In Sri Lanka, they talk a lot about harmony because of the conflict. So let's come back and be united. Let's not have conflict, that intense conflict anymore. Whereas Australia talks a lot about civic engagement. Next slide. So when I say citizenship education, let me just clarify, because it means different things across different countries. Now, we use citizenship education as an umbrella term to educate people, young people, to engage with the society, okay? It is very, very contested, so nobody can say, this is a good citizenship education. That is a bad citizenship education. We can't say that because, it really depends on context. It is political. Political doesn't, here I'm not referring to, political parties, but it really, what I'm trying to say is that we all have different needs and different wants. I want you to be here with me for an hour. Some of you might think, oh, but actually I've got lots to do. I'm feeling really tired. So who win? I win? Or you win, right? So it becomes quite political. We all want different things at the same time. It has multiple labels. For example, sometimes it's called religious education, moral education, civics and citizenship education, social studies. So you see those different labels, okay? All right, next slide, please. So in Sri Lanka, I'm going to use the term civic education because that's what they use, okay? In Australia, I'm going to use civics and citizenship education because that's what they use, okay? So if you hear me say civics education or civics and citizenship education, I'm actually talking about the same thing. They just use different labels, okay? In Sri Lanka, there is a lot of focus on unity, peace, because it's post-conflict, and moral qualities. I'll talk about that later. there is very, very explicit and clear post-conflict aims. They really don't want the conflict to occur again. In Australia, it is a lot of focus on knowledge and participation. I'm not sure whether you have heard these people, sometimes they say, oh, the Australian students like to ask a lot of questions in the classroom. Have you heard of that? Well, yes and no, okay? I'm just saying yes and no, but because they're being encouraged to participate. In university classes, sometimes the lecturers give points for participation. So if you don't participate, you don't get certain points. So you see, they really encourage participation. You will hear what they say as active and informed citizens. Okay? All right, next slide, please. Okay, so there is therefore a very, very key tension that I'd like to ask all of you who are young people here. Now, on one hand, some of you were saying that citizenship means I want them to actually understand the cultural norms. Ying, you said you want to stay in Indonesia. Let me teach you what is the way to behave in Indonesia. That's important, right? On the other hand, are we actually asking young people what they want? They are the people who are going to live the future. But a lot of time, the syllabus, the curriculum is written by people who may be like me, a bit older. So are we actually engaging with the lives of the diversity of young people? So that's a key tension here. Okay? All right, next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay. So this is something that I think if you want to think about global citizenship, you might want to take a photo. So my co-author, lastly, we got together. So remember, she's from Sri Lanka. Is it too loud? Remember, she's from Sri Lanka, and I'm from Australia. So definitely we need something to guide us to have some common understanding. So we reviewed the literature, so you can see they are from different scholars in the field, and we actually look at 3 different domains of purposes. So I think even if you're coming from digital literacy, you're coming from educational management or guidance and counseling, this might be something, if you are thinking about citizenship, perhaps that could be something to think about. So let me just very briefly go through, how we analyze our work. So the first domain is qualification. So I asked the question, Ying, what do I need to know if I were to live in live in Indonesia? So maybe I need to know cultural norms, right? What else do I need to know? Sorry? Culinary?
Culinary.
Culinary? Oh, the food! Oh, yes, I love it. Yes, okay. What else do I need to know? Culture, yeah. What will offend people? How to behave, right? How to dress, when to call people. I don't call people in the middle of the night, that kind of thing. So ways of life. So that's qualification, very important. So I need to know, like, for example, intercultural knowledge. I need to know your moral values, what is important to you, and make sure that I respect that. So some of you, how would you help me? How would you help me to be able to live well in Indonesia? What would you do to help me? Yeah? No? How many of you might invite me to your house and explain things to me? Maybe that's one way, right? Yeah? What What's other ways? Maybe you do a school tour, you explain things to me so I know what to do, right? Possible? So that's socialization, right? You help me to be, become a sociable person in the Indonesian society. Now, subjectification becomes a little bit uncomfortable. So some countries, some education systems, they may not really like this. I can say this as an example, for example, in Singapore, okay? They don't quite like people to keep questioning, like, why? Why do I have to do this? Why do I have to do that? All right, so subjectification can become a little bit uncomfortable for people. Why do I need to learn this? Why do I need to do this? So people start asking questions, okay? So this is just a general framework to help us to look at what are the possibilities, what is complex, what is limited. So we're not trying to make a value judgment. Oh, this is better, that is better. We're not trying to say that. We're just trying to say, oh, so what is it like? Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so our methodology, just very quickly, we compared the curriculum. You will have your own curriculum too. We use it as a pedagogical guide. So it helps us to see what does the Department of Education think is important. All right, it is a cultural and a political artifact. So we actually intentionally chose those documents to analyze. Next slide, please. So in Sri Lanka, civic education textbook, teacher instructional manuals, social cohesion and reconciliation policy documents. In Australia, we look at the Alice Springs Declaration, which talks about what is important in Australian education. And we also look at the social studies curriculum documents. Okay? The key idea why we chose them is that we believe, all right, this is how we interpret it. When we look at those curriculum, they tell us what is important to the country. Okay, next slide, I'll go a bit faster. Okay, so the first big finding is that we look at Sri Lanka and we look at Australia, they all talk about similar things. Talk about democracy, they talk about social justice, they talk about human rights, they talk about celebrating diversity, they talk about social cohesion, but later you will see they do very different work. So I'm just going to pause here. Think about your context in Indonesia. How many of these is also spoken about in Indonesia? Maybe you can help me because that is something that you will be the expert. I think you talk about democracy too. Yeah. Social justice, human rights. Yeah, inclusion is part of, the right to education. Celebrating diversity, yes, right? You have this diversity in unity, right? Yeah, in your plan. Social cohesion, yeah. So very, very similar, something for you to think about and apply in your own context as well. Can we get the next slide, please? So, if you look here, in Sri Lanka, they focus a lot on harmony. Diversity is framed as something to be managed. So you start to see here, sometimes people, in the Sri Lanka document, they say, well, let's celebrate diversity. It looks like diversity is something that is very, very positive and happy. But if you analyze the documents there, they actually framed diversity as we need to manage. Too much diversity is going to give us problems. So if you look at that on the right here, you start to see, we must think of our country and work as a nation. Let's disregard racial differences. For them, racial differences is a key problem because they've got that post-racial conflicts there. For example, we can see all people in Sri Lanka, living in harmony. They disregard, so they don't care whether they are Sinhalese, Tamils, Muslims, or Burghers, right? So whenever there is conflict, they are attributed to personal inadequacies. You're not tolerant enough. You're not respectful enough. You have a desire to accumulate power and resources. You make decisions without seeking alternatives. So they see diversity as something to be managed. So even though they say, let's celebrate diversity, they don't actually see diversity as quite something very positive. They actually look at ways to manage diversity. Let's not be too diverse. Let's think of ourselves as one. Nothing very wrong with that, but now remember the scale. How do we balance that? Nation building, national integrity, unity, harmony, and peace. Now I'm going to stop here for a minute. Again, think about what it means for you as an educator. If you were a teacher, and we are teachers, right? And we are teaching our young people to be global citizens. To what extent will you teach these? What other things will you teach? Okay, next slide, please. So for us, it's very important that we do this analysis not by me. I need to make sure that I'm doing it with my co-author because her voice is very important. Post-war context is not explicitly engaged. Because remember, they have got really, quite serious conflicts. But now, they just don't talk about it. There are some people who are still living in the effects of the post-war conflict. So to ask them to disregard differences, let's forget about our disagreement. Sometimes it may not agree with their lived experience. They might still feel like something is not fair, or they might still have things that they want to address. So this is perhaps one possible limitation. It does not quite reflect the true lived experiences of everybody. The ethnic and linguistic divisions continue to persist, but let's just not talk about it, okay? Harmony, not everyone's lived experience. Some people are still being discriminated in Sri Lanka, okay? And diversity is to be celebrated, but politically muted. So let's not talk too much about things that make us uncomfortable. Let's just talk about the things that make us happy. You might need to pause here and think about, okay, that might be useful and important on one hand, but what else is missing there? Okay, next slide, please. Australia, on the other hand, they talk a lot about civic participation. You need to speak up. You need to participate. We have this activity, you need to do this, you need to do that. You really need to be part of the community. They talk a lot about dialogue. Let's talk about it. If you have this diversity, this is not your lived experience. Let's talk about it. Let's not just pretend that it doesn't happen. I mean, in the policy, that's what they said, okay? In reality, it can be very, very different. So diversity, instead of being framed as something to be managed, in Australia, is something to engage with. You're diverse, you think differently, let's talk about it. Why is it different to you? So what can I do to work with you? So they like this kind of approach, okay? Something to act within. So instead of pretending that diversity does not exist or is a completely good thing, they actually want to encourage the young people to talk about the possibilities and the limitations, okay? So if you look at some of the examples on the right, they really want them to question, do research, analyze, investigate issues. Why are there so many homeless people in Australia? right? Like, it's supposed to be a country with quite high GDP, but if you go to the city center, you still see homeless people. So they really want students to question the policies, question the laws as well, okay? So in policy, it looks like, really quite participative, right? Diversity is something to be questioned. Everybody has a voice. Next slide, please. Thank you. However, the Australian case is not perfect as well. Now, even though they talk a lot about engagement, let's talk, let's deliberate, let's have a discussion, they actually do not talk a lot about the power in the power difference, right? Who gets to say this? The struggles that some people have. So the topic, the sensitive topics are actually not quite, they don't actually talk a lot about in textbook. So basically you can see this values education in Sri Lanka. We don't do that a lot in Australia because Australia believes that, everybody have your own values. However, the flip side will be, you can't always say, let's talk, but we actually don't have anything that binds us together, right? So that becomes a little bit difficult. Next slide, please. I promise we're reaching the end, okay? So when we put this together, and imagine that you have young people from Sri Lanka and young people from Australia, and they get together, okay? Imagine in the world stage now, Sri Lanka, personally responsible. I'll do this well. I'll make sure I don't offend. If I have a conflict, maybe I need to look within myself. Did I do something wrong? I need to have self-awareness. Okay? Australia, when they're faced with diversity, I make you unhappy? Tell me why, because their idea is, come, let's talk about it, right? Whereas some in Sri Lanka, they may start looking in. So it's not this is good or this is bad. We're really trying to find the balance there, right? That's the key tension. Next slide, please. So what does this tell us about education for coexistence? I think it's the same for all of you, so we can open up for discussion later. We really need to rethink the idea of living together, okay? Democracy is not a single script. Democracy in Indonesia, democracy in Australia, democracy in Sri Lanka, they're all different, okay? Diversity is not politically neutral, all right? Diversity, sometimes there could be people with more power, there could be people with less power, okay? Citizenship education reflects the historical context, the conflict, economic priorities, and national anxieties. Okay, there is a strong, when we talk about global citizenship now, across the world, if you read the news, there's a lot about let's protect our country. Well, that's what some countries are doing, right? Let's not do this, let's not do that. But really, what is global citizenship? It's really coming together, and it's getting harder and harder in the current context, okay? Next slide, please. So, why this paper matters? Well, if you're interested, you can read this article. It just got published. But I just want to say that this article was finalized shortly before the terrorist attack at Bondi Beach. You would have read about that, I think, right? So, I think, within this context of conflict in Australia, we really, really need to think about what it means to live together, all right? What does it mean? So as teachers, as educators like all of you, this question is even more important. How do you teach? What do you teach? What values do you teach? What skills do you teach? Okay? All right, last slide. Next slide, please. If you're interested, maybe I wouldn't say it's future research as well, but perhaps thinking about your future practice. You know, when you're teaching something in the classroom, how do you actually negotiate the tensions? Do you pay attention to what young people's lived experiences are? What do they need? Or are you focused more on telling them what to do? Okay, that balances, that balance there, how do you navigate that? And last slide, I think the next one will be the last slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. Yeah, this will be the last one. So basically, living together is not just a skill to be taught. A lot of people say we need to be humble, so we need to teach them humility. We need to teach them respect. Well, it's not just values and skills, but it's really thinking about the ethical question, what do we want as a society? So remember, I asked you a main question, if I was to stay here, what would I need to know? So if Sri Lanka, Australia, and Indonesia, we all value democracy and diversity, how do we decide what to focus on? How do we teach them? And how do we use differences as dialogue rather than to see differences as something that is negative? So I'll leave the question to you. Okay? All right. Thank you. Thanks for listening to me. I know it's not easy in this time of the afternoon. And if you have food, please eat the food, please. Yeah, it's a late lunch. Please, it's okay. Yeah. Anyway, I forgot to tell. I really want to thank your teachers here, Ibu, for coming, and you're spending your afternoon, precious afternoon, more helping me to moderate too. So I'm very grateful. Yeah. Do you want to take any questions, thoughts while you eat? Please open up your boxes and eat. I don't mind.
Yeah, please.
Thank you so much for the time, and I feel so grateful to be here today. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Pita, and I'm from Educational Technology Department. And I also curious about your opinion about what Indonesian preference about the woman education. Like, some people in Indonesian think that a man have a higher position than a woman in education. So many people in Indonesian call it patriarchy. It's a popular behavior in Indonesian, and it's a really not support for human justice. And I also curious about what your opinion, how a woman can have a same education like a man. That's it. Thank you.
Well, first of all, before I actually respond, number one is that I think this idea of patriarchy is not just in Indonesia, not just in education, right? Yeah. I mean, I was from Singapore. I think some sense of patriarchy is there too. In Australia, you hear that a lot too. Yeah, yeah, especially in higher education. Your Ibu will know, right? Yeah. So the idea of patriarchy, I must say, is not isolated to an Indonesian problem. It's actually quite historical around the world, right? Yeah. I don't think I am qualified to answer your question about the Indonesian context because I'm not familiar. But I think that's something that, as a teacher in the future, I really want you to think about what you value and how would you teach. Is it more of, I would think subjectification will be quite important here. How do you get your students to actually be aware of this? Obviously, you are affected by it, right? Yeah, and I think it's not just you. Many women, men, everyone starts thinking about this topic as well, right? The idea of justice and things like that, balance, right? So what would it look like in education? What would you do? Don't worry, I don't have to look at you, but the question is posed to everyone. How would you teach differently? You could have issues of patriarchy that you want to talk about, Some people want to talk about racial discrimination, land rights, the many, many controversial issues. So how should we teach that? Any ideas? In your classroom, you are all going to be teachers in the classroom, were you? Any ideas? I'm really asking a genuine question. Any ideas? How do we raise awareness about issues that we really care about?
I cannot answer that, but I can give example. I applied to many scholarship years ago, and either for master or for my PhD, and I got asked, if you got married, will you take a leave? What about your study? If you get pregnant, will you take a break? And what about your study? How will you work? How will you fund your life? Huh? Just because I'm a woman? Then they could ask me some things like that. And this is not in Indonesia. So it happens everywhere.
I actually think that if you look at this space here, I'm only here for 20 minutes, half an hour now. But this idea where we actually create this civic space where we're sharing experiences, feelings, diverse opinions, where this is, well, some people say, is there a safe place? But a place where we can actually talk about issues will be a good start.
Gender could speak up well and so on. Things could get really high.
Yeah.
And I think it would be difficult from the university point of view to control it.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
So from what I hear, control is important.
Yeah.
Okay.
Critical is important, but if the students get too critical,
Okay.
I think it will make the university, the upper management feels
uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Citizenship education is uncomfortable. Yeah. So something for us to think about. I don't think that there is one right answer. And I think for anyone engaging in the space of civics and citizenship education, I'm very sorry to disappoint in that it's very difficult to give a single solution. But in my teaching, I teach in teacher education we create that space. So just because Bita, you asked that question, I'm very sure there will be at least one other people here, at least for me, to start thinking about the idea of patriarchy. Yeah, and I think what your Ibu said is very, very real, right? Because the reality is, we can talk about it, but it can make some people uncomfortable. The management, when they get uncomfortable, maybe you don't have to get promoted, that kind of thing. So it's very, very political. But Bita, you have planted the seed in our head now. We'll start thinking about it, whether we agree or not, right? And maybe in our little ways, we could do something. So I attended a Women in Leadership course in Sydney. I think one of the things that, it can be, of course, big things. I'm going to talk to the management and things like that. It could also be day-by-day things. So sometimes in Australia, I don't want to talk about Indonesia because I don't know. In Australia, sometimes it is quite common. Let's say a woman like me, and I'm culturally diverse in Australia, right? We could make a comment in a meeting, and you may, again here, the men in this room, I hope it don't make you uncomfortable. Sometimes, I'm just saying sometimes it happens. It can happen to a male, it can happen to a female. It can happen to certain races, it can happen. So it can be very dynamic. It has happened before that sometimes people take what the men say. In that case, in the situation of patriarchy, it can be taken more with greater weight. So Ibu can say the thing, and I need maybe somebody else to say it, okay? So little things I can reinforce. Oh, Ibu, actually what you said, I actually agree. So little things, these are political acts, right? Oh, what you said is correct, Ibu, and you could support your fellow, friends as well, especially when you start to sense that go there. So I just want to encourage you. It need not be big protests or anything. Citizenship is actually really day-to-day little acts. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, but
Thank
you definitely,
for bringing it back up.
you definitely, I can tell you, have planted the seeds in our head. Among us, some of us may feel relief. Oh, thanks, Peter, for bringing that up. But I can tell you, there might also be some of us here that say, oh, Peter, you make us feel really uncomfortable now. Well, that's part of citizenship. Yeah, yeah. And if you talk about digital technology, let me just inject a little bit.
Yeah.
When now people go to AI and ask, tell me about patriarchy. What do you think AI will tell you? What do you think AI will tell you?
Try it.
Try it. Yeah. Now, what is worrying for me in my first round of my data collection across Australia and Germany is that the pre-service teacher know that AI is not 100% reliable, but they still do it anyway because it's easy. So imagine talking about social justice and relying just on AI. We really need to think about the implications there.
Yeah, I teach my AI culture in Indonesia because it helps me to analyze my students and then prepare the activities that would fit to them. But then I am thinking now we have to actually include it in our analyzing when we analyze the characteristic of our students, then it should be there.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
should
It's
put
personal.
in the culture. And I really like how you frame, maybe that's the term because I just made it, celebrating diversity. Yes, because in Indonesia, in the old times, we talk about unity in diversity, and then we celebrate. So we only show the culture in celebration using the traditional clothes from all over Indonesia and so on. But we don't really get in touch with other cultures. Like I told Ibu Ying before, that in 2000 in UNESA, my students were mostly from Surabaya and all around Surabaya. And then these days, after almost 30 years later, I got students from Sumatra, I got students from Papua, I got students from Kalimantan. Now you are so diverse, but we still I think celebrating diversity is still in the low level, not yet to social justice or human rights.
Yeah.
If I may put levels on what you have already put there.
Yeah.
We're still in that level. And not yet we have this dialogue. Okay, we have dialogue. Only for students from Sumatra, they have special dialogue. That's it. Do you ask your from Java to also join you about this dialogue and then to show that this is our culture? No. But maybe we got more on movies because nowadays there are many movies with other cultures. Yeah, like last month's movies from Bunur culture. Itu yang saya bilang saya lihat tapi yang budayanya dari Sulawesi itu, Bu. Kalau Mama, kan lupa. Yeah, I just know about this culture, and she's from that island, and then she verified that. Yes, that's true. Now we're seeing it on movies, so it's almost another level, but not yet in education.
Yeah.
Not yet in education.
Okay. All right.
we just celebrating with using the clothes, but not, ada kita acara mengenal budaya asing, budaya antar pulau. No, we just wear the clothes and that's it. Yeah.
This is quite interesting. I should actually talk less, probably to give this one example, not an Australian example. In Australia, it is a very important strand curriculum focus that now Australia need to prepare young Australians to be able to engage with Asia. Indonesia is top there, right? So I'm very interested. I go into school and I like to see how teachers teach about Asia. For example, teach about Indonesia. How do you think Australian teachers teach about Indonesia? Any ideas?
Other than language?
The language, yes, but it's also dropping, right? So they could teach the Indonesian language. How else do you think Australian teachers teach about Indonesia? Huh?
What culture?
The-
Language is also culture.
Okay,
Art, music,
could be.
traditional.
Traditional traditions, traditional clothes. Yeah, religion, maybe your Pancasila, they sort of know some things, right? As Indonesian now, how would you like Australian teachers to teach about Indonesia? Honestly, tell me. If I were to ask you, people in Australia, they really want to get to know you. What do you think teachers should teach to have a truer picture of Indonesia? Of course, some people teach about other countries too, but I'm in Indonesia, so I'm asking you, how do you think we should teach?
Ayo, bukan kalau ya, di Australia sekarang di sekolah-sekolah itu diajarkan tentang Indonesia. Menurut kalian, apa yang harus dimasukkan tentang Indonesia ke dalam itu? Karena itu kita ada exchange student juga, tapi PLP ya, untuk ngajar di sekolah-sekolah Australia. Tapi pengennya apa nih yang diajarkan di Australia tentang Indonesia? Harusnya. Tadi kan bahasa sama traditional culture, art and sing and dance, clothes, religions, Pancasila itu sudah. Ada nggak, punya ide nggak? Harusnya mereka juga harus tahu ini nih tentang Indonesia. Apa itu?
History? Okay. Tell us.
I think it's history first, and then maybe personal values of Indonesian people, and then maybe foods too, because this is good, and then.
They have food festival, Indonesian food festival annually.
Yeah. Oh my God. Okay. And then next maybe about the social, like how actually Indonesia is going in the inside. Sometimes people cannot see what is inside because they are in outside. Yes, something like that.
Point here. So basically, no matter what we do in Australia, it will still be trying to know Indonesia from the outside. So if you think about citizenship is very much qualification, the facts. In fact, the facts that we can only get from internet, right? It's nothing personal, like getting to know you, getting to know Bita, getting to know you personally. But actually, personal connection is important. Like Ibu is different, could be different from what the internet is saying about Indonesia. So imagine I learn about Indonesia from the internet and I come here and I imagine this is what the internet say and this is what all of you are. I think you'll be very, very offended. Yeah. So in some way, it is important to know something, but as global citizens, perhaps coming in is also to get to know the person as a person. Because we are all different. We are all different, right? So how would you teach your students to be global citizens now?
Nah dibalik sekarang, gimana kalian nanti di dalam kelas yang mau magang, mau PLP nih ya, itu mengajarkan tentang global citizenship. Jadi nggak, oh kalau orang barat itu pasti kayak gini, titik gitu. How would you include that? Kok bahasa Inggris? Bagaimana memasukkan itu ke pembelajaran kalian? Yeah, you can think for a few minutes. Any idea? But one time we have a guest from Philippines, but from a small island, and then she's the vice rector, I guess, and then she told me that she asked Indonesian people there or whoever came to Indonesian previously, and then asking about Indonesian people, and then she asked me, oh, she said, all the women wears hijab. Why don't you? Huh? Me? How do you know? Yeah. So you're not from Indonesia? I thought you're Philippines. No, I'm not from Philippines, but I'm from Indonesia. So, so what I've learned is not all true.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, I got that question too. People were asking, some of my students were asking me, yeah, so there could be things that, that individually were different. Yeah. A lot of people in Australia, they look at me to be friendly. They tell me to eat sushi. Well, but I'm not Japanese, So, so it happens. Yeah, it happens. Yeah, sorry. Ni hao. Yes, correct. They will shout at me and say ni hao. Well, okay, I understand, Mandarin, but that's not my, so it's very interesting now that we bring these stories in. So that's another way, if you're talking about pedagogy, the narrative approach, bringing in diverse stories. So if, for example, issues of social justice, patriarchy, whatever, you could actually understand stories. How does it, your stories from Ibu, stories from you, stories from me, different people, the experiences. So perhaps that understanding of that awareness is the first step. And when there's awareness, maybe people will start to accept and start thinking about the idea. I mean, I'm just talking about tentative ideas that we could do in the classroom. Yeah, because in Australia, we have that. Some of my students are very concerned about socio-economic inequality. Well, that's a big thing too. So how do we teach students that we come into a classroom and some children have a lot and some children have very little? You can't say, oh, they are diverse, but we are united, we're happy. Well, there's nothing to be happy about if my life, I'm struggling and I don't have food. That happens in Australia too. You have children coming in totally lost. Domestic violence at home and things like that. Yeah. So the idea of let's just celebrate it is good to some extent, but as teachers, I think we have this moral and pedagogical responsibility to keep thinking about the limits of the slogans that we see in policies. And how do you teach that in your own classrooms? Right.
Yeah, do we have time? Yeah, only 5 minutes. Is there any
final
question?
thoughts?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. So I want to ask, sometimes, my name is Aulia. I come from educational technology. And then I want to ask, sometimes I found that some students are studying citizenship education, such as Pancasila or anything else like that. And then after studying that for one semester or 1 year, it's just come
to their short memories, not really planted in their self themselves. And then I was confused and think that moment, how could we planted this really into their soul and not just as a kind of field that we are study right there. Okay, thank you.
Oh, that's a really, really good question. I mean, for us working in social science, there is something that we call, trying to connect to the lived experiences of the children. I know Pancasila are the principles, not just in different countries will have different, yeah. So how would you, if I were to pose the question back to you, maybe the first one, tell me the first one. I know the first one. What is the first one? I've actually written about that. That's one of my articles. I did write with my colleague in Indonesia about Indonesia and Australia. What? Yeah, just remind me the first one. What is the first on the Pancasila?
Ketuhanan Yang Maha Esa.
Mhm.
And then the first one only God. And then the second is
Yeah.
Apa nama sisa? I don't really the English.
Okay.
Sorry, so I will speak in Indonesia.
Sure.
Okay. The first one is Ketuhanan Yang Maha Esa. Dua, kemanusiaan yang adil dan
All
beradab.
right. Don't worry. Just use the first one.
Sorry, I'm
first.
sorry.
Yeah. So this is interesting, right? How many of you can actually recite all the thing? Just think to yourself. Okay. Can you? Anyone?
I'm sorry, I forgot.
No. Don't feel that, because just now my pressure. And I asked you to translate on the spot somehow. So there's a lot of pressure. But okay, take the first one as an example. All right, when you're teaching that, right? How would you relate to the life of the students? Just think about that. You have a class of students. I want to teach it through the experience. So I don't want them to just remember that, but I want to help them to be able to see the connection with that in my life. How would you do that?
That's actually a big discussion about it last year in UNESA, because UNESA, as a public university, we have to help foreign university, like Western University that opens in Indonesia, to do the courses like religion and Pancasila and so on. And then we had such a big discussion on that, on the first sila, the only one God. And since in Indonesia we admit 5 religions and 5 plus 1, and then even though it's the same Islam education or Christian education, but still at that time, the Christian education here and the Christian education in Australia were different. So the rectors and the vice rectors asked like, what is it with Pancasila? Can we just teach the whole perspective of seeing God and then seeing with other glasses? But still, the perspective of one and only God, or the beliefs, the Islamic beliefs in Indonesia, the Christian. But no one can answer that, and I got expelled, I guess, from the room because I brought that up at the time. It's a very political dialogue, and political means critical, and critical is always uncomfortable for people out there. So it's,
Look, I actually, you got me thinking, and I guess, you will remember that experience. If you're asking, how do I teach the students, what your Ibu has just gone through is a good experience. Maybe you could post that in your class. How does it relate to all of you? What do all of you think? That discussion is actually very, very important. Yeah, and I mean, to me, ultimately, what is the outcome will really decide on who is deliberating, because they have to come to a consensus, right? Yeah, and that's what citizenship education is about. Sometimes in my last semester, when I taught my students, my own pre-service teachers, I really got them to think about quite controversial questions. They got quite angry, some of them. Like, you asked me to do an assignment that I have no answers for, why don't you just tell us what the answer is? Well, I say there's no answers, but you must understand that I have put you now in a civic space. And this is citizenship education. It's not something I can complete in one semester, but definitely when you leave the unit, whether you're angry or not, that is going to stay in your head. The discomfort, the criticality, the thinking about things. Because they even ask questions like, is it possible to have a safe space? Is a safe space even possible? I can ask a question, maybe I'm going to offend her, right? Maybe I'm going to make, sorry, your name again? Aulia. Yeah, I'm going to make Aulia uncomfortable. So maybe my students were saying there's no such thing as safe space, because when I say something, if my idea is I need to please everybody, that's not going to be possible, right? So we're always negotiating that space. Like, if I knew that Aulia is going to be uncomfortable, maybe I might. So this is where maybe interpersonal skills come in. Oh, how do you feel about what I've just said? Was it okay? I actually don't mean to offend. So maybe part of citizenship education is also, intercultural understanding, interpersonal socialization, and things like that. It's very, very delicate. Yeah, right? It is. We've gone through some, I'm sure we have gone through some difficult situations. Yeah.
Difficult.
Yeah. I guess my last question, I would like to leave with all of you is to keep thinking about what you will teach, and really keep thinking about, when I teach this way, what is the opportunity? How will I help my students? But at the same time, how do I limit, in what way am I limiting some of their growth? Yeah, I hope you all, thank you for staying awake. You haven't eaten yet, please eat. Okay, anyway, all right, I'll zip. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we've come to the end of this session. Thank you so much for coming. But if I may say a bit, labeling is dangerous then.
Sorry?
Labeling is dangerous. Stereotyping is dangerous. Right?
Yes.
We should not do stereotyping people
yeah, for
from
sure.
different culture.
Yeah.
And for awareness, then it's not just your responsibility because you're from the social science and humanities, but also for us all in this Faculty of Education, because when we're building awareness, it starts from ourselves, our friends, communities, and then in our classroom. Because you will be in the classroom, right? Yang sudah PLP, belum PLP? Belum ya? Belum PLP? Belum semua. Iya. Iya, nanti kan mau PLP. Yeah. So maybe that we can build the awareness from ourselves. Thank you so much, Dr.
Thank you very
Ying,
much to
for
all of you,
time.
and the ibu-ibu for taking time to come. So thank you very much. Yeah.
Ya, terima kasih semuanya. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Banyak. I know that. Thank you. Please eat your lunch. Yeah. Thank you.